It is my pleasure to be joined by Charlie Goldsmith from the Cincinnati Enquirer to talk about the Bengals and this crazy run that they've been on. Hey, Charlie, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm sure people in Cincinnati are really good after this stretch that the Bengals have been on. I mean, how good is this team?
Well, you've seen them beat the Chiefs. You've seen them shut down Patrick Mahomes. You've seen Joe Burrow go toe-to-toe with Mahomes and Brady and Deshaun Watson. You've seen, as many injuries as just about any team in the NFL has faced. You've seen practice squad guys like Trenton Irwin and Alan George and Jay Tufele, people who the Bengals coaches hadn't even heard of last year, stepping up and keeping the momentum rolling.
Cincinnati's a great sports town. Granted, it's nice when you have something to root for. Can you put this team in context for us?
Yeah, so Cincinnati for a long time was a losing franchise. Before last season, it had been 30 years since the Bengals had even won a playoff game. It had been, in a lot of ways, content with mediocrity. With Marvin Lewis, who never quite got over the peak, and Andy Dalton, who never quite did the same. They got Joe Burrow, they got Zach Taylor, they got a group of players with a completely different, much higher standard. Cincinnati's never had a team this confident, this talented, and this aggressive since the 1970s, and you've seen the city respond accordingly.
What's it been like in the city? What's the reaction been like?
Well, I'll speak with this first. They've renamed the stadium Paycor Stadium this season. They got naming rights for the practice facility and for all these gates. Companies around the city are wanting to throw their money at the Bengals because they're that popular. You've seen in downtown Cincinnati, they now shut off basically everything for a tailgate. They close off all the streets. All these businesses are able to advertise through how many people are downtown for Bengals game days. There's nothing bigger in all of Cincinnati, and I think all of Ohio either, than the Bengals right now.
So they're the best team in the city since the 70s, but they did have this 2-3 kind of inauspicious start. And then the last 9 games, they have absolutely surprised everybody, unless you were really in the know, I suppose. What do you think the catalyst was at that 5-game mark? How were they able to turn it around?
I think the real catalyst was after they started the season 0-2. I talked to some players this week. They said there was too much of a Super Bowl hangover. What happened that week was a bunch of heart-to-heart conversations. The offensive line coach chewed out the line. The head coach and the offensive coordinator said, we need to completely redesign the priorities of the offense. They made some huge changes. And then Zach Taylor, the head coach, said, we need to give this team a kickstart. We're going to take the ball first if we win the coin toss. And I talked to 10 different players who said that decision created a mindset and an identity and an approach for that team that has carried since, and they're 10-2 since that point.
Just remarkable. And, Joe Burrow, in another conversation for MVP, how would you assess his performance this season?
Unbelievable, again, but what's been surprising is he's doing it in a completely different way. The way defenses were playing the Bengals last season, Burrow made a living with deep balls, highlight plays, explosive, unbelievable grabs by his star receivers. Defenses of this year have been going, we will give you anything else. You have to beat us in any other way. And it took Burrow 2 weeks to really adjust to that. But since week 3, I think he's been the best quarterback in football. He has shown a patience and a maturity and a Tom Brady-like ability to read a defense, make adjustments at the line of scrimmage, and win with his IQ and his smartness and his accuracy, plus clutch as well, has put Burrow right back in the MVP candidate.
Talk a little bit about his growth. I mean, when you assess kind of how he's different this year, is that the biggest thing for you, that he has managed to somehow find a different way to win these games?
That's exactly it. He had to find a different way to win games because he was so good last year that he actually started a trend across the NFL where defenses started playing completely differently. Burrow in real time had to adjust to that. And it's not just that, it's fun throwing deep balls. It's not quite as fun taking the 5-yard check down to your running back. But sometimes those plays can be even more important. Plus, again, the ridiculous level that he's predicting defensive coverages before it happens. That's something Burrow didn't have at the same level last year. They've put more on his plate than ever. It's worked, and it has the offense, again, one of the best units in the NFL.
On the injury front, what do we know about Sam Hubbard and his availability moving forward?
Yeah, so one of the Bengals defensive ends told me yesterday Sam Hubbard, if he could, would be out there with spikes on his boot Sam's one of those guys, but he isn't a boot right now. Sam's one of the most underrated defensive ends in football. No one's a better run stopper than him in the league. Plus, he's a very talented pass rusher. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. So like I mentioned, all year, different guys have had to step up. Chase has been out, Mixon's been out, Higgins has been out. Now they're going to have more of that on the defensive line, playing without Hubbard for a bit.
And who do they really look to as not an X factor, but really just somebody to kind of fill that void while he's gone?
So they're very specific. They want the most versatile defensive lineman possible for these exact situations. So they're going to be able to spread out Hubbard's responsibilities among 2 or 3 different guys. Like Cam Sample's probably the most similar run stopper. Joseph Osai will replace him in pass rushing situations. He's this fast, twitchy, elite athlete. Those 2 in particular, but it'll also be guys like BJ Hill and Zach Carter picking up some of that slack as well.
Their depth, you're detailing perfectly one of the shining sort of, I can't even find the right word, but it's just a shining example of why this team is so good because they've got such depth. I mean, when you think about the fact that they are prepared to have versatile linemen come in, next man up mentality, the locker room seems to have the right mentality. Is that the coaching staff that gets the credit for why they've been able to be so resilient and versatile?
In a press conference last week, Zach Taylor named every single assistant coach by name for that exact reason. It's twofold, though. It's the coaching staff and it's the front office as well, specifically how much they're on the same page. The Bengals have the smallest front office in football. Because of that, they give their coaches much more say in personnel decisions than almost any team across the league. And as a result, you have the coaches, the assistant coaches, seeing specific niche skill sets for guys that can come in and contribute if they're needed. And, I mentioned the defensive linemen. I've mentioned some wide receivers and defensive tackles, guys who have really never played much NFL football before. The front office was such on the same page with the coaching staff about who they needed to bring in that would be a fit, that when those players got those opportunities, literally you've seen practice squad guys running the same routes they've used for Jamar Chase on game-winning plays.
Should that be the blueprint moving forward? Granted, it's probably not feasible with all these other teams in the league, particularly the organizations that have much larger front offices, but there seems to be that kind of classic struggle between how much power does the coaching staff get, how much power do those making decisions within the organization have. This is something that has seemed to work for Cincinnati against some odds. Do you think that other teams should maybe try to implement a little bit more autonomy for the coaching staff, particularly maybe even the assistants?
A lot of it depends on who the assistant coaches you hire are. The Bengals have hired a lot of assistant coaches with strength in development, with strength in scouting, some in recruiting from the college level. Not every assistant coach has that background. So for the coaching staff the Bengals have assembled, it's a really good fit. It's not going to be like that for every team. But again, with the Bengals, it's been a hyper-specific system that's really taken advantage of the strengths of the organization.
I love that you're able to provide insight from inside the locker room. You talk with so many players. Are they a true underdog? I mean, are they flying under the radar now? I would say no, just because so many people have seen what they've done over the last 9 weeks, but they seem to have a chip on their shoulder sort of underdog mentality. Are they an underdog?
I don't think Joe Burrow's ever been an underdog, but I think the defense very much is flying under the radar. They're taking it very personally. As they ran off the field into the locker room in Tampa Bay on Sunday, they had a massive chip on their shoulder. During the week, Brady said they were a fairly tough defense. And apparently that wasn't nice enough. They wanted a little more from that. So as they ran to the locker room, they were shouting, fairly tough, fairly tough. They were calling out Brady in their post-game interviews. They were calling him an old man. They were saying we had him shut down. They were saying we showed that we're tough as nails. They really do feel like they're flying under the radar. They've been an unbelievable defense this season, and they're not quite getting that recognition yet.
Did they feel disrespected that so much attention goes to the Buffaloes of the world, the Kansas Cities of the world, potentially the Tampas of the world?
I think the defense especially does. Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Mixon, those guys are stars. But the Bengals have a really interesting defense. It's a bunch of guys who weren't stars on their previous team. They signed a bunch of free agents. The guys who were like the 4th best players on the Houston Texans or the New Orleans Saints or the Dallas Cowboys, guys like that. Guys who flew under the radar in their previous stops, who have grown and developed a ton into now they're playing at a Pro Bowl level. They never got that recognition earlier in their career before. Now they've gone out and proved it, and they're saying, we're the stars now. Where are our Pro Bowl nods and all-pro recognitions? And as they showed in Tampa on Sunday, that's the mentality they're really embracing right now.
If they end up at the Super Bowl, how much credit does the defense ultimately deserve?
Well, the Bengals made the Super Bowl last season because of their defense, really. The offensive line really struggled in the playoffs last season. And the Bengals found a way to claw back and win games against Tennessee and against Kansas City because of their defense. They literally held Patrick Mahomes to the worst statistical second half he had in his entire life. They made it to the Super Bowl because of their defense. And the offense has gotten even better. The defense has gotten even better. And hand in hand, they're playing at a high level and can send the Bengals on another run.
And Charlie, how would you handicap this weekend's game?
I think the Patriots have one of the best defenses in football. I think it's going to be a tough, hard-fought game, but the Bengals have been good at very specific things. They are an efficient run team who can get the 4 yards when you need the 4 yards. They don't turn the ball over. Burrow really doesn't throw interceptions anymore. Those two things can keep you out in front against the Patriots team with an offense that is very much searching for an identity right now. I think they're expecting a low-scoring, hard-fought game, and they've proven they can win those types of games.
Is the run game, do you think, the biggest key to the game, or is it something else?
I think the biggest key to the game is forcing turnovers. When that's happened to Mac Jones, when you force New England to try to play a little bit more aggressively than they're comfortable, they just don't have the firepower. A quarterback, at wide receiver, at tight end, they don't have the firepower in those matchups to make big in-game adjustments and change their game plan. The Bengals have been creating a ton of turnovers recently, and if they can, get the Patriots to play with even less confidence, that can really go a long way.
Could make a very difficult day for Mac Jones over the weekend. And then they've got the Bills, and they end up with the Ravens to end the season. Ultimately, do you think that that's a favorable way for them to close out the year heading into the postseason?
I mean, that's a team that might be the number one seed in the AFC and a team that's head-to-head with them for the AFC North title. They're going neck and neck right now. The Bengals have had a motto since November. They, over the second half of the season, have had the toughest schedule in the NFL. If you're a good team, the Bengals have played them. And they said their motto is going to be, they have to play us. The motto is saying that, yeah, we got some tough teams on their schedule. But every team that has to face the Bengals has to face, the team that thinks it's going to another Super Bowl this season. They've shouted that. That's become a mantra. There are signs in the locker room. It's a very tough schedule to end the season, but they wouldn't want it any other way.
Well, yeah, and I guess that was my point, is some teams might look at that and go, man, this is going to be a gauntlet for us right before the postseason. I get the sense, based on what you're describing, that this Cincinnati team might benefit from having to run a gauntlet like that straight into the postseason. I mean, with what you know about their mentality, and of course, injuries are really the key to the whole game, especially this season. We've seen so many critical players be sidelined, and that ultimately have a profound impact on what the team is able to do. But, this kind of hard-nosed, we know we made it to the Super Bowl, but we still have a chip on our shoulder anyway, Cincinnati team, do you think that will actually serve them better in some sense?
I know it did last year. Last year in Week 16, they beat the Ravens in a very high-scoring game at home. And in Week 17, they beat Patrick Mahomes with a huge comeback to clinch the AFC North title. That momentum is really what sparked the idea that they could be a deep postseason contender. That momentum went a really long way. I can't think of a better way to create even more momentum than if they're already riding a huge winning streak. If they keep that going and beat the Ravens and the Bills, I couldn't imagine a formula for any more momentum heading into the playoffs.
How do they stack up against Buffalo?
I mean, so the biggest weakness on the Bengals right now is they've had some injuries at cornerback. And, Allen to Diggs is the best wide receiver quarterback combo in the league. Someone, maybe rookie Cam Taylor-Britt, is going to have to step up against that star matchup. But the Bengals have a really good defense. They're probably going to need to be prepared for a shootout. The Bengals offense can drop 35 on anyone, and it'll probably come down to two of the most clutch quarterbacks in the NFL, who makes the last play, Allen or Burrow.
So you've got this incredibly talented defensive unit. Granted, there are some key injuries, but it seems like they're versatile enough to kind of work their way through that. You've got Joe Burrow, who continues to impress, another MVP quality year, doing it in a completely different way, and some weapons that have been really helpful to him. Is there any reason to think that this team isn't a team that could end up right back at the Super Bowl?
I think the Bengals are the most complete team in the AFC. Like the Chiefs have a really, really young defense that's really been struggling. The Bills are missing Von Miller. And just like the Bengals, they're pretty weak at corner right now. They've started practice squad elevation guys and 7th-round picks searching for what's going to work for them. The Bengals, top to bottom, it's a roster that their biggest weakness is better than anyone else's biggest weakness. And, Zach Taylor likes to call it a team without a weak link. And the Bengals can say that more than any other team in the conference. That in itself, plus a superstar quarterback in Joe Burrow, that's how you go on a run in the playoffs.
It kind of feels like Philly a little bit. I mean, some people have been sort of speculating way out that these two could meet each other, but you've seen the Eagles kind of outclass the Giants recently, outclass so many different teams this year, and they are complete. And Jalen Hurts has been playing out of his mind. I mean, on the other side, is that the only team that you really see that is as complete as Cincinnati?
Completely the only one. The Eagles have built top to bottom a deep, dynamic roster at every single position. I think, the Eagles probably have a little bit of a talent edge at every position aside from quarterback just because of some of the superstars they have on the offensive line, on the defensive line, and the secondary. But the Bengals have a much better quarterback, I think. Jalen Hurts has been an MVP candidate for sure this season. But Burrow's clutchness, his accuracy, his toughness, his big playmaking ability, I think that gives the Bengals, that's the best team in football this year. The Bengals probably enter that game thinking they should win because they have Joe Burrow, and that's a sign to how confident the team is right now.
And Joe Burrow has always been so likable, and I think has earned the respect of the guys in the locker room really shortly after his arrival with the way that he's performed since he's been there. Is he the sort of unequivocal leader of the locker room? Does he have any weaknesses in terms of getting those guys to play for him, or is that fully his locker room?
Burrow changed the Bengals more than anyone else. Like I said, they were awful for a 3-4 year stretch before they got Burrow. He came in with a different standard. They named him a team captain before he even played a single NFL game. Burrow delivered the huge speech that shifted the turn in the playoffs before the Bengals faced the Titans last year, that he was sick of the underdog narrative and he was ready to go on a run. Burrow has been the guy who sets the example just with his calm demeanor. He's the reason the Bengals are so confident when they're down 21-3 in the playoffs against the Chiefs, 17-0 last year against the Buccaneers. The Bengals are incredibly confident even in those situations because of Burrow, and they very much follow his lead.
Fantastic insight, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining us and kind of taking us inside the mentality of this team, the locker room, the way that they've been playing. I guess I would just end with this. Are there any sort of pits that we need to be watching out for over the next couple of weeks? Are there any X factors that you see, whether it's on the injury front or elsewhere, that might hamper what they are able to do moving forward?
Yeah, the two biggest things, one, injuries like you've mentioned. Who on the defensive line can step up to try to replace the production they've been getting from guys like Sam Hubbard? I think that's going to be massive against the quarterbacks they're facing. And then in the secondary, like I mentioned, they have a rookie cornerback, Cam Taylor-Britt, a second-round pick they love, but has never quite been on this stage before. And a cornerback alongside him, Eli Apple, someone who nearly got benched in the middle of the season, got back to that starting role following a season-ending injury. Those two guys are going to need to go toe-for-toe against the top offenses in the NFL.
Stage is set for some of those stars to be born in these playoffs. Thank you so much, Charlie Goldsmith from the Cincinnati Enquirer. Fantastic stuff.
Thank you.